All right, I would like to say hello to everyone and thank you for joining us for this presentation on the history of the Upper Montgomery County Fire Department, Volunteer Fire Department, which provides a very vital service to our area. Tonight, we're joined by Scott Graham, who is the fire chief, and he also works for Holy Cross Health as a regional director of safety, emergency preparedness, EOC, and workforce wellness. So please remain muted during the presentation and feel free to put questions in the chat and we can read them off at the end. But there will also be an opportunity to unmute and ask questions during the Q&A. And if you enjoy tonight's presentation, please be sure to check out our website, which is poolsvilleseniors.org, and consider joining us for other events in the future. As Tookie mentioned, we do have a pig roast coming up and bingo. And we also have a trip to Glenstone Museum coming up. So without further delay, Scott, you may begin.
All right. Well, thank you all. And thank you for joining us this evening. And I'm joined tonight by a couple of my colleagues, Heather Haller, who is the president of the Upper Montgomery Volunteer Fire Department and also a member of our auxiliary, and Jeff Eck, who everyone knows as Councilmember Eck, but we all know him as Jeff here at the firehouse. He's one of our firefighters, one of our active firefighters and EMS providers, and also a member of our board of directors. So I'm happy that they could join us this evening. You know, the Upper Montgomery Fire Department is steeped in history and tradition, and it was actually fun for me to go back through and really get to talk to some of our members about where the fire department has come from. And I'll explain to you all now where we are today and kind of that in between. And it's been a pretty interesting evolution, not only of service to our community, but also in the fire service itself. So many things have changed. You know, there's I know my father was a Maryland State Trooper, and he has a book that I now have. It's called From Horseback to Helicopter. And, you know, you could really look at the fire service in Montgomery County from horse-drawn to some of the most technologically advanced fire rescue apparatus in the world. And I'll start by saying that where you live in Montgomery County, and anywhere you travel in Montgomery County, you are truly blessed to have one of the best fire services in the world. And I'll explain to each of you how we got there and what we're doing here in our, I want to say our little piece of the county, but in our huge geographical piece of the county. So we're celebrating now, we're into our 76th year of service. And just recently at Poolsville Days, we were able to celebrate one of our members, Tubby Stottlemyre, who has served our department for 65 of those years. And we made Tubby an honorary fire chief in our department for his service. And as I was preparing for tonight, I was able to sit upstairs with him and talk about some of the history, some of the past of our service. And like I said, I was kind of like a kid in a candy shop because I learned a lot of stuff and kind of equating names and properties and places around the department and actually the Upper County area. Basically, the stimulus or the impetus behind the Upper Montgomery Volunteer Fire Department came from the Monocacy Lions Club. And a group of gentlemen back in '45 decided to start to explore the feasibility of putting the department together. And then in January of 1946, the very first meeting of our fire department had taken place. About 4 months later, 3 or 4 months later, the charter in April of 1946 was established to charter the Upper Montgomery Volunteer Fire Department with the state of Maryland and begin its operation toward purchasing apparatus, building a building. And the 5 signers of the charter were from geographical areas around us, you know, Poolsville, Barnesville, Dickerson, Beallsville. And it was interesting because as I was talking to Tubby, we talked about those names. And, you know, from Beallsville was Charles Davis. He was a dairy farmer, and what is now the Four Streams Golf Course was where their farm was. A gentleman named Lloyd Jones. He owned an International Harvester tractor parts company. And as many times as I've driven by Neutron Products, that used to be Lloyd Jones, which is the old, it was called Mercer and Jones, which was an International Harvester. So he owned that. Erskine Hamilton, and then Carlton Van Emmen from Poolsville. And then Bill Griffith was from the Beallsville area, but he was working for the county employee. He was kind of a maintenance mechanic type person for Montgomery County. So he was very instrumental in that original signing. Poolsville got a loan for about $30,000 to begin selecting the site, and the site in which we sit on now was donated by the Grubb family and the Griffith family, as well as the Carlton Van Emmen family. I mentioned Carlton was one of our original signers, and we began to build in the summer of 1947. In July, they laid the cornerstone and time capsule. And I'll ask Heather and Jeff real quick. We did on the 75th anniversary, did we open that time capsule? I couldn't find whether we did or not.
Yes, we did.
Okay. So, again, there's just a lot of great history in that. There have been many pieces of apparatus come and go through here. But the first one that we purchased was, I'll go back to the building. The building had a contract price of $35,000. And when you think of some of the construction projects that we're doing today, for example, a county fire station right now starts at about 18 million. So a little bit of a delta there between the $35,000 humble beginnings of the UMCVFD. We're in the middle of a capital project here at the fire station. That certainly, the $35,000 pales in comparison to some of the costs that we have now in the fire service. We purchased our first piece of apparatus for about $8,300, and it was housed down here to Spring Valley Farm, just east of us here in Beallsville, and it was a chain-driven Cosmopolitan fire engine. And $8,300, we just purchased a rescue support unit, which cost us a little over $400,000. The fire engines that were supported by Montgomery County cost a little over $1.2 million. So you can see over the years, those prices have changed significantly and have gone up exponentially. But we kept it down here to Spring Valley Farm until we opened our firehouse in 1948. And then it was placed in service here at the fire station. We also then went into the emergency medical services business, or the ambulance business, as they called it back then. In 1953, we bought a used Buick ambulance, and that ambulance was purchased by a donation from the Monocacy Lions Club, and that was $2,500 compared to today's EMS units. And Jeff is laughing because we have units now that an EMS unit starts at about $250,000. So it's again, when I was going back through this, I'm thinking, gosh, how did this happen? But that's the cost of doing business. And in 1946, Emma Colehouse started the Ladies Auxiliary, and that auxiliary now, which is called the Auxiliary, began with a membership of about 85 to 87 people, and their purpose was to help raise funds to support the Upper Montgomery Volunteer Fire Department. Many of the things that we have today, many of the things that we purchase today, are thanks due in part to the efforts of the auxiliary. It's no longer just a ladies auxiliary. We welcome everyone to support us and help us in their efforts. But many people can remember, and going through this, and you'll see it in the PowerPoint presentation that you'll receive, is the parades with the auxiliary decked out in their white and marching in parades here in town and things like that. And it was really fun to see people like Betty Jean Selby as a little girl, walking with the auxiliary. And now Betty Jean has, I believe, north of 60 years with the auxiliary and being a part of our organization. So a lot of history and tradition. The bingos, bazaars, many of which you perhaps have attended. Jeff had mentioned earlier, we're really excited that bingo is back at the Upper Montgomery Volunteer Fire Department after a hiatus for COVID, and our boathouse bingo, and that will be run by the auxiliary, just to kind of give back to our community for supporting us throughout the pandemic. But they had a picnic in 1946, and they raised $1,100. And they, as I mentioned earlier, they had established a marching unit, and the marching unit for the parades and musters, which are fire department competitions at other locations. They would take the auxiliary as part of that to the musters and other parades around the area, other fire department parades. And then the two groups kind of came together around 1980 to form the auxiliary. So they had the group as to the way it is formed today. I mentioned before, some of you came on to the phone or onto the call. Montgomery County Fire Rescue Service is a combination fire and rescue service, and probably as much as 35 years ago, the balance of combination and volunteer firefighters here was very heavily volunteer. Most people worked in or around the area, at the farms around the area, or in town. And they were alerted in the early days through a call down system. There was a gentleman, Mr. Chisholm, in town. He would receive an alarm. Somebody would call him, and he would begin then to call the members. It was kind of their call down system. And then they had house fires at what I had said out at Neutron, or what was then Mercer and Sons International Harvester. They had a house siren at Hillard's Plumbing in town. And of course, we had a house siren here at Fire Station 14. So people would hear that in the area, and they would come in to pick up apparatus and to respond to calls for emergencies. But as times have changed, we no longer activate house sirens. There was technology from the early 70s all the way through probably, I'd say up to maybe 5 years ago, where firefighters would carry pagers, and those pagers were activated by a central alarm in Rockville, or what we now call our Public Safety Communications Center. Prior to that, again, it was a ring down, or it was a phone call made from one person to the firefighters. Many times they would call them in the middle of the night, and these folks would just be up, and they would come to the firehouse first, pick up apparatus, and then goes to the scene of the emergency. Now, most of our volunteers, if they're not in the station, when there is a call that comes out, they can go directly to the scene and report to the officers, whomever is there on the scene to fight fire or to provide service as an EMS call. So today we have a combination system, as I mentioned earlier. There are career personnel and there are volunteer personnel that staff all of our apparatus. As we were speaking earlier, you would not know the difference on the scene of an emergency. We are all trained the same. We all are equipped the same. We have the same focus, the same mission. And right now we have 6 career personnel that staff our station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They primarily staff the engine, or the piece of equipment that brings water to the fire, and one of our medic units. But we also have support vehicles here, such as a tanker. Most of our area here is unhydranted, meaning there's not fire hydrants around it, so we have to bring the water to the fire. So we have a tanker, we have a brush engine, we have, now the county has designated our station as a swift water resource. So we have several boat and swift water boat components that we have to staff. And all that takes a combination. We can't do it with all career people. We can't do it with all volunteer people. So we train together. We work through operational procedures together. And it's interesting how this has come from, like I said, a single fire truck and a single ambulance to where we are today in a very complex fire rescue system. When we go into the community, and I know Jeff sees this, Heather sees this often, when we go into the community and we have an opportunity to speak about who we are and what we do, it's our opportunity to brand to the community the Upper Montgomery Volunteer Fire Department. And yes, while we're an emergency response department, I think we're a very deeply rooted civic organization in the Up County. Many of you all have either been members, been involved with, or have joined us for some of our celebrations or fundraisers and things like that. And we, see most of you and see many of you as we go through town. And my commitment to the fire service in Montgomery County, as well as my commitment to the Upper Montgomery Volunteer Fire Department, is to provide that service to make certain that we have the amount of people that we need to staff the apparatus. We have a lot of new members. We have members who are in what we call the candidacy stage of their career, where they're not quite through all their schools yet. And then we have a handful who are able to be, functional volunteers and staff apparatus. So as we have grown, there were one or two career people that came on board in the 60s as drivers, and folks that were here at the station. I think 1966, we hired our first two career firefighters. And it was John Repass and Charles Bruner. And then we hired one more person, George Sharp, in 1967. And in 1978, we hired our very first paramedic, and that was John Rooney. John then rose through the ranks to become a captain and quality assurance officer prior to retiring. So, when you look at having one person in the station who would wait for 3 or 4 people to get here before they could leave for the fire, to where we are today, when you dial 911, you'll have an immediate response. And then the volunteer cadre will come either to the scene or come to the station to pick up the additional apparatus. It's a really unique system, and we're blessed that we have the system we have. We rely heavily on the community to help us support that system, because while we do receive funding and apparatus in part from the county, we do have responsibility to not only our department, but to the town to provide additional resources. We like I said earlier, we purchased the rescue support unit, which helps us with auto accidents. It has, quote unquote, the jaws of life on it. And we use that because the piece that we purchased about 26 or 27 years ago had reached the end of its lifespan. We purchase support vehicles. We purchase tankers that bring water to the fire. And so many different ways we support. It's a symbiotic relationship. Montgomery County provides us apparatus, but yet we support by purchasing other apparatus that otherwise we wouldn't be able to get without the community support. So long journey, and we certainly look forward to the journey ahead of us. It has been, for the last 2.5 years, the volunteer members of the UMCVFD have stepped up, staffed ambulances through COVID because of a significant increase in call loads. They have been here to respond to the community in need, not just immediately in the Up County area, but many times they would run mutual aid either into Frederick County or down into Quince Orchard area or over into the Hyattstown area. So there's really no boundaries to where our service ends. I don't think the pandemic was anything that any of us could have predicted, imagined, planned for, or whatever. But I will say that, and Jeff was very instrumental in keeping the staffing opportunities going. He would put out emails for people to upstaff or staff a BLS ambulance here at the fire station several nights per week. So we continue with that tradition. We continue with that. Service or provision to the Up County as well as the county at large. As I mentioned to you earlier, we're kind of coming back to life here after COVID and being able to be in the community. We had a very wonderful 4th of July celebration, great fireworks show, great public turnout. It was truly a family event that we're still getting folks thanking us for doing it. Poolsville Day was wonderful to actually get into the streets. But being at Poolsville Day wasn't just a party and handing out fire hats. We actually saved a life at Poolsville Day that otherwise would no longer be in our community. So we were able to provide an emergency medical services response to that large of an event. And I think many of the folks in town will tell you that it ranked right up there with one of our largest Poolsville Day celebrations ever. And we host teams that play softball on our softball fields on Friday nights, and on weekends they have tournaments. And we support our community. And I say we support our community. We provide so that you all can come in to purchase our pork and beef sandwich sales, very popular. And then I'm really excited about a couple of things coming up. And again, it's about us opening our doors again to the community. And that's our open house on October 16th. Jeff gave you all the details on that. But it's every entity, or it's every aspect of our entity coming back out. The auxiliary with bingo, it's a lot of work, but I think it's really going to bring the community back out with us. There's going to be fire trucks, there's going to be police vehicles, pumpkin patch, hay rides, things like that. Those, it sounds like it's a big carnival, but there's a message to that. Every time that we can see these kids, we can brand something about fire safety with these kids. And then the kids go home. It's kind of like backpack education. They remind their family of it. They remind their parents of it, their siblings of it. So we're 76 years of tradition. And we continue to move forward with that tradition. We have tailored that tradition to meet the needs of the community, to meet the changing needs of our system. Whether it be volunteer or career, it has evolved, it has changed, and we are here for that. And I'm excited to talk about us each and every time that I get to. So I will, Jeff or Heather, if there's anything that you'd like to add, or just open up for questions.
Well, if I may, I would like to maybe emphasize some of the points that you made, Chief.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
May I share my screen?
Yes, just 1 second. I'll make you,
Sure.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. And I really just wanted to highlight some of the things that Chief Graham spoke about. So this is a picture of our station, and on the north end of our station, as Chief Graham was pointing out, we now have 3 new, they're not quite operational yet, but 3 new drive-through engine bays. And this came about with the help of, basically, one of our volunteers is kind of an architect and put it all together. So that's under construction right now. And we really look forward to having that operational quite soon. And over here, we have a little picture that we took at the 4th of July fireworks this year. You can see a number of our volunteer crews here, which staffed the ambulance, helped out in many, many different ways at the 4th of July event itself. So was highly successful, as the chief pointed out. I also wanted to mention, the chief mentioned that we have a large area. The area which we refer to as our first due area is actually bigger than all of Washington, D.C. So we have what a first due area is when someone calls 911, our station is dispatched. And our station covers a little more than 86 square miles. All of Washington, D.C. is about 68 square miles. So we have quite a large response area. Also wanted to point out a couple of the uniquenesses that we have within station, and we're Montgomery County Station 14. Of course, we have lots of different farms, and with farms come heavy equipment and, of course, animals. We have several equestrian and polo facilities in our area, of course, schools and daycare, churches. We also have the NIH Animal Research Farm, and you never really want to go in there unless you're escorted. We also have, as Chief pointed out, neutron products, and they have radioactive materials there. So again, when you get a call at Neutron Products, you want to just wait at the front door. They will arm you with a dosimeter, and then they will escort you to the area where the person might need assistance. Of course, we also cover the Potomac River, and as Chief pointed out, we cover the longest stretch of the Potomac River of any other Montgomery County station. And as you probably are aware, Maryland owns the river. So when there's a boat call or overturned kayak or whatever it might be, and they call 911, a Maryland station is dispatched. And they will also dispatch a Virginia station as well to kind of help spot where the problem is. Of course, we also have the power plant in our area, the Sarah Hour pool, the incinerator is in our area. The composting facility, which did catch on fire, I think there was 4 or 5 years back, maybe a little bit more. And that was an all hands on deck sort of experience. We have 2 gun ranges in our area. So Isaac Walton, and in addition to that, we also have the Montgomery County Police gun range. And one of the cool things about the gun range is this is also where the Montgomery County Police detonate, where the bomb squad of the Montgomery County Police detonate any suspicious packages. So from time to time, we'll get a call at the station and they'll ask us, hey, can you guys bring over a brush truck? And just in case anything starts on fire, put it out. That's always a fun response. Of course, we also have the Caliva Summer Camp. And then, of course, we also have rail, both passenger and freight rail that passes through our area. So these are a number of operational elements that Chief spoke about. But I also want to highlight some of the, let's call it non-operational elements that the Chief mentioned as well. Because in addition to being, of course, an operational fire station, we also do community events. And regularly we have kickball and softball. We have a softball field up behind our fire station. And we invite everybody to come and watch the softball games, the kickball games. We have a concession stand there, so you can get hot dogs and hamburgers and pork sandwiches and all sorts of stuff. We also have fundraising events. So we have our pork and beef fundraising event. And actually, that's coming up here on Saturday, October the 8th. And then we also do, as the Chief pointed out, staff kind of a first aid station and EMS station at Beallsville Day. Of course, also at the July 4th, we have our open house coming up, as the Chief mentioned, on October the 16th. We also, knock on wood, we're bringing back a breakfast with Santa this year on Saturday, October the 3rd. We also do our Santa ride. The Santa rides around on top of the engine through the Beallsville neighborhoods. That's always a very welcome event. And likewise, we also support the toy drive for WUMCO. So this is just a short list of the community service events that we have throughout the year. And I think that's one, maybe just mention one more thing here. I forget what it is. I kind of forgot, lost my page here. Yeah. Maybe that was it. Yeah. I'll leave it at that, but thanks, Chief, for offering a few minutes to give a few more highlights of Upper Montgomery Volunteer Fire Department. Thanks, Chief.
So I was watching the chat room when Jeff was presenting some of the other activities and information about us, and the actual Dickerson fire came up in the chat room, the incinerator fire, and that was a pretty large incident. It was what we would call a multi-agency response to that, because we had Montgomery County, Frederick County. We even had some of our Virginia counties that came in to assist with that. It kind of mimicked if any of you all remember the Trevilla dump fire, the stump dump down on Trevilla Road. And I, so many things happened at that fire. I found out that I was going to be a father at that fire. I kept saying, to my wife, what's wrong? I'll tell you tomorrow. So I was like, tell me now. So I'm like, oh, wow. Couldn't you have waited till tomorrow? But that was, it was what we would call a campaign event. A lot of resources, a lot of people, the auxiliary and the canteen, which I failed to mention, but the canteen is an element of our organization that is primarily staffed by auxiliary members and corporate members that provide refreshments and Gatorade and food and things like that at house fires, not just in our first two area, but they've been called throughout the rest of the county to assist on larger fires, and that was certainly one of them. When you have an incident that's large, and mulch and trash that is burning, the county runs the transfer station in Rockville quite frequently, and it's just nasty, and you're there for a long time, a lot of water. So yeah, we remember that one quite well. Another question that came up in the chat is about a cadet program. Currently, Montgomery County has a high school cadet program that is selected once per year, and they spend their junior and their senior years in the afternoon at the training academy. They go to high school in the morning, and then they go to the training academy. At Upper Montgomery, it's kind of difficult. We don't have a cadet program per se. We bring our members in when they're 17 or 18 years old, because again, we're not as large and robust. We don't have standby crews every night. So we like to have our crews. We have a standby team on Thursday nights that come in with a captain, and they drill, they have an education, etc. But as far as a local high school cadet program, we do not have that at this time. I'm going to reach over here and look at the chat room, Kelly, or unless you're monitoring here. Dot Elgin's book of Poolsville mentions a February 1953 fire that destroyed property in town. Any insight where that was? And her book has pictures. So we were looking back through some of our historical pictures downstairs, and there was a very nice presentation for our 75th anniversary of some of the larger fires that we have experienced in the past, and certainly unfortunate fires that we've experienced in the past. So I've just taken a note on that one so that we can pull out any information, and I can certainly send that back to Kelly for this. So the Oddfellows is coming up here on the Oddfellows building, but there was a question. How many gallons does a modern tanker hold compared to the first 500-gallon one? Well, we have a 3,500-gallon tanker currently out in the shed. So there are tankers near us in Frederick County. They have tanker tractor trailers that can bring up to 7,000 gallons of water in. So it's not uncommon for areas that don't have. Again, from a resource perspective, we're blessed to live in Montgomery County because we have 10 tankers within the county that we can call upon. We would have what's called a water supply task force. So if a fire is dispatched into an area that's known not to be hydranted, that water supply task force is dispatched very closely behind the original assignment, or the first engines and trucks that are sent there. And the flow rate out of a tanker during a fire, we can dump a complete tanker in about 2 minutes. We have what's called a jet dump, and we put a large, we call it our swimming pool, but we put a large temporary tank along the side of the road so that tankers can pull up alongside of it, dump their tank, and we draft out of that to continuously supply the engine or the attack engine that's at the fire. And we like to maintain a fire flow of no less than 500 gallons per minute. So once we start that shuttle and we start that process of bringing water into those tanks, sometimes we can have 2 or 3 tanks set up that the tankers can come in. Most of them in the county have jet dumps, so they're able to dump that tank pretty quickly. So what's the response time if you're called to a fire in Poolsville? Our response time is outstanding. We have less than a 2-minute turnout time from the time the alarm comes on in the fire station until the time the apparatus leaves the station. Our response times vary from distance traveled, and not only distance travel, but topography. We have some back roads, we have some country unimproved roads, and we really have to be careful there. But for the most part, we can get into town in about 4 to 4.5 minutes. And then the outlying areas take a little bit longer than that. Just going down here. Provide some safe tips for backyard bonfires. Don't do them. No, you need to have, and I'm a commissioner. I'm gonna ask if there's an ordinance in Poolsville, because I don't want to tell everybody to go out and light them up. But from a safety perspective, it needs to be contained in an approved burn. What do you call it? Chimenea, or a burn pit style. So Jeff, I'm not sure if there's anything from a commission or a town perspective out of the town. We're getting into the time of the year when a lot of stuff is dry, and I know we've just had a bunch of rain here over the last week and a half from Ian, but absent that, it may look like everything is damp and okay to burn, but as we experienced with the wildland fire that we had in 2009, that burnt basically from Clopper Road all the way up toward the Damascus area, it may look like it's okay and not dry, but certainly having a water source. But Jeff, is there anything in town that prohibits the bonfires, or not bonfires, burn pits?
Thank you for asking. The municipality of Poolsville defers to Montgomery County on a number of areas, one of them being public safety. And in the area of public safety, Montgomery County has regulations in terms of, and they will from time to time, when the conditions are very dry, prohibit outside burning. And we do get telephone calls into the station rather routinely, especially during this time of year, especially when it's dry. asking if Montgomery County has prohibited outdoor burning. So that definitely does take place from time to time. As the chief was pointing out, if you have a backyard fire pit, for example, it has to be a minimum distance of 3 feet away from any combustibles and contained. So, and again, these are regulations. The municipality of Beallsville defers to Montgomery County in a number of areas. One of them certainly being public safety. So thank you for the question.
All right, another great question in there from a technology perspective is one about drones. And yes, Montgomery County Fire Rescue and Montgomery County Police Department both have a unmanned aerial vehicle program, a drone program. It can be used for a host of things, whether it's a brush fire. They can be used for search and rescue. They can be used for a plethora of things. We're just getting into that business, so we're still exploring the possibilities. We actually have used it for some high-rise building fire activity down in Bethesda. That was pretty neat for the incident commander to be able to see, a complete 360 view from the drone. So I think drones are going to be a great part. Jeff and I have had the conversation because I know he's somewhat of a drone enthusiast, but if somebody is lost on the river, instead of putting a boat and trying to search up and down the river, then, why not launch a drone and try to get a more exact launching point or get a more exact location of whoever is in trouble on the river, not to delay our response. But I think it makes for a safer response and gives us some more exact information. So I look forward to drones becoming more commonplace in the fire service. Another question is, what percentage of calls are medical or EMS versus fire? You're looking at about an 85 to 87% EMS rate over top of fire, and included in the fire are rescue calls such as automobile accidents and things like that. So it's very, very heavily weighted toward emergency medical services. Again, it's a shift. It's a shift from days past where there were a lot of fires. But if you think about technology, education, construction, engineering, we have sprinkler systems, we have people are much more responsible, and there's been an incredible fire safety push from the early 70s from a program called America Burning. And America Burning, oddly enough, was co-authored by one of our former chiefs in Montgomery County, David Gratz, in the early 70s through Congress. So, it's just done a complete turnaround. We have one medic unit at the Upper Montgomery Volunteer Fire Department, but we also have 5 volunteer paramedics. So in the event that medic unit is out, we can easily recall and put out information that we'd like somebody to come in and stand by. If we note that the ambulance is out and is going into another area, volunteers can come in here and upstaff the ambulance for what we call the next call. Our engine company is a paramedic engine company. So at all times, there is a paramedic on that as well. So let's say that we have someone who has chest pains and medic 714, which is our unit, they transport them to Shady Grove. One paramedic goes on that unit and one of them stays on the fire engine so that we continue to have ALS coverage in the Up County area. And there are times when they have to transfer units in. When all of our resources are out, they'll transfer either fire resources or EMS resources into our area, again, because of the distance we have to transport either to Frederick Hospital, to Shady Grove Hospital, or Holy Cross Germantown Hospital. So we could very easily be out of the area for 2.5 hours, and they'll what we call backfill our station for that. It says, when there is a call for a river rescue, is that coordinated through Park Police? So Montgomery County is the authority having jurisdiction. But we do have response plans that are multi-jurisdictional. So when there is a river call, there is a standard protocol that dispatches the closest Montgomery County appropriate resources. It dispatches Fairfax County's appropriate resources, or Loudoun County, depending on the position in the river. And United States Park Police Eagle 1 is put in the air. And Eagle 1 can be used for rescue. But I like to say Eagle 1 is kind of our guardian angel. If anything happens to one of our rescuers or one of our boats that are responding to it, that's their primary mission, is they're in the air to make certain that we return to shore safe. And they stay there until we clear the boats off of the river. So it's a great partnership we have with Eagle 1, or the United States Park Police.
There's another question about Is the transport time to the hospital longer here than in other areas of Montgomery County?
It is, because of our geographic location. It's just, if you think about driving from here to Quince Orchard, for example, there is that distance. There's that 12 to 13 mile distance. People think that when they call an ambulance, we're going to go lights and siren and crazy and get there in milliseconds. But if we don't get to you, we don't serve you. So we drive very safely, especially in the up county. As I mentioned earlier, we have unimproved roads, we have country roads, and our traffic patterns up here can be as wacky as anything. If you are unfortunate enough to need our service, and you wonder why we don't go lights and siren to the hospital, we have a very strict protocol that it depends on the acuity of your call, how sick you are, how injured you are, that we can safely transport you to the hospital. And it may seem like forever that it takes you to get there, but generally speaking, about 20 minutes, we can have you to any of our local facilities.
And the other part of the question was, are there any ALS units in Upper Montgomery County?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier our unit Medic 714, the ambulance or the EMS unit here is a medic unit. It's staffed with a full complement of advanced life support drugs, advanced life support equipment. So in a basic sense, we can provide an advanced airway. So we can intubate somebody. We can start IVs on people. We can do full 12-lead electrocardiograms on people, and administer a host of about 37 different medications depending on the medical condition. So we have that as the full medic unit. But we have a paramedic assigned to the paramedic unit, the transport unit as we call it, and we also have a paramedic assigned to the engine. So if one is going down the road and both paramedics aren't needed, we always maintain an ALS presence. And again, just depends on how many calls we get. Somebody mentioned earlier, you get back-to-back calls, and that does happen. It is part of the business. But then our communication center in Rockville will backfill our station with additional resources because we're out here so far.
Does anyone else have any other questions before we wrap up?
Heather, from the corporate standpoint, is there anything you'd like to add for our presentation?
So I appreciate the opportunity for Upper Montgomery to speak today to the Poolsville seniors. There are a couple things that I did think about on this call, since we are talking to the senior group of Poolsville. A lot of us have children that have grandchildren that go to the schools up here. We have a unique community, and you had mentioned the person that we saved at Poolsville Day. If anybody was on that street during Poolsville Day and saw how crowded that street was, the uniqueness of our community and everybody knowing everybody and being able to put that call out and have that road cleared for that unit was incredible. You would not have seen that down county as fast as it happened up here. But it would be nice to see more people, grandchildren, coming into the fire rescue services, either career or volunteer. We really need to keep the information flowing for emergency plans. I know myself, for my children, when we moved into Poolsville, being in the house we were in, we had an emergency plan. I know a lot of kids have kind of gotten out of explaining that in schools today because the schools are so overwhelming in education. Sometimes the basic stuff is not taught anymore, about smoke detectors, etc. Also, for the senior group, a lot of people may not know that there is a resource that's available through Montgomery County called the File of Life. It's a little jacket that can be magnetized to your refrigerator. You can put all your medical history. If you happen to live alone, that is a great resource for any of those units that come. If, like Scott Graham said, if you're unfortunate to have a unit come to you and you may not be able to speak for yourself, that is a great resource for those medics that do not know you and your history is between your house and the hospital. nobody knows. So that's a great resource. Also coming up on Christmas season, tree safety, you know, being from a family with a farm and seeing how quickly those trees can go up. You know, that's something else. You know, if you see somebody with a live tree in their house, please mention, you know, how often they water it. And, you know, because that water resource to get to that, to put out a fire, you may not be near a hydrant. It's very important to put that out. So those were the key things I was thinking of on the call today. But thank you for letting Upper Montgomery put some information out there to you. And if anybody needs any more information or has questions, you know, I know Scott Graham, myself, Jeff Eck, we have an admin at the office that's there Monday through Friday, usually about 10 to 2. You shoot her an email or give her a call. She will hunt us down and get that information to you. So thank you.
All right, so I think, you know, again, I'll kind of close out our departmental remarks with, we would absolutely positively love to see you guys at our open house. Again, it's our way of branding who we are, meeting you, meeting our community, and allowing you just to kind of come out and see what we do. It's a fun environment. Heather had mentioned children, grandchildren, you know, bring them. We'll have a lot of fun with them, and but don't tell them they might learn something. You know, they might learn something. I just don't tell them that. But the auxiliary will be providing hot dogs and chips and juice and cookies. And I wanted cotton candy to sugar them up and send them all home, but I think I got vetoed on that one. But it really is. It's a great opportunity. It's a great family. I have worked in every battalion in Montgomery County throughout my career. And I can tell you I don't want to say the relaxed nature, but the relaxed family feel that you get here at Upper Montgomery. It's, you know, I can remember being the 3rd Battalion chief, and the 3rd Battalion was from White Flint to White's Ferry. And I taught Sunday school down here at Memorial Church. And, you know, I would run calls at 3 o'clock in the morning with auto accidents, and I'd see kids from my class. I'm like, you know what? I hope you're wide awake in about 6 hours in Sunday school because you don't belong out here. And you know everybody. And you hear somebody's address. And I know Heather and Jeff and Dave Morgan and I, we text each other, is that so-and-so, you know, is there anything that's needed? Because, you know, especially with Jeff, with Heather, with other members here who have been ingrained in, I've lived in the Up County for 31 years. But these folks have been in this fire department and know everyone. So chances are you will see, again, unfortunately, if you need our services, chances are you will see someone you know. And take comfort in that, because these folks give their time. They are away from families on, you know, sometimes holidays and birthdays and things like that, but they do it to serve. It's truly a spirit of servant leadership in my world to be able to have a group like this. And, you know, we're fortunate. We're fortunate to be able to serve you. And we thank you for the opportunity to come before you tonight.
I have a question that I used to have the same gentleman come to my house every year around this time for donations. Is that still happening, or should I just go to your page and donate?
A good question. I'm going to give to Heather because that's a corporate question. I'm
yes.
in charge of things that have lights and sirens on them. I'll toss it down to that square to Heather.
So unfortunately, due to COVID, that could not happen. We could not have people go door to door. On a corporate side, I've lived in Beallsville for 30 years, and I, before joining the department, would donate that way. That was a service that we reached out to and contracted with. And I found out later, being part of the department, part of our funding went towards that service and part came to Upper Montgomery. So a lot of people didn't know that. I myself did not know that until I sat on the board 10 years ago, that's what happened. So if you would like to donate to Upper Montgomery, direct through the link is the best way to support the department. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us and putting on such a great presentation. I thought it was really fascinating to hear about how the fire department got its start and kind of how it is today. And if anybody has any questions afterwards, you can always email us at info@poolsvilleseniors.org. And again, thank you, Scott and Heather and Jeffrey, for being here. And if you did enjoy this presentation, feel free to come to some of our other events. I just like to mention again, on our website, poolsvilleseniors.org, you can find our calendar, which has the pig roast on the 15th from 6 to 10, bingo on the 11th from 1 to 3, and a trip to Glenstone Museum on the 21st at noon. So if you would like to unmute and say goodbye, now would be a great time to do that.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Very
much,
good.
guys. It was great.
Yes,
Welcome so much.
thank you.
Thank you all. Be safe.
Thank you for the
All
opportunity.
right.
Thank
And
you.
you be safe too.
Yes, ma'am.